Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. We may have a few other people joining as we go through, but we'll kick off as we've got an hour and a half to get through. Pretty packed agenda. Nice to see everyone today. My name is Megan Hume. I'm one of the application support managers who work on the Green Heat Network Fund. So this meeting today is to run through the application seminar for specifically round 10 of the fund. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. We are recording this session and the video and the slides will also be available after the meeting. Mics and cameras are not enabled for the moment, but we can bring you in if there's any questions. But the main form of asking any questions will be through the Q&A box, which you should see along the top of your screen. Please feel free to also provide any comments in the chat as well. And if you want to come in to ask a question verbally, please feel free to raise your hand. In terms of the agenda, we'll provide you with an overview of the Green Heat Network Fund. We will then run through the eligibility criteria. We will then discuss the application and assessment process. We'll then give a demonstration on the application form, and we'll have kind of a last portion for the Q&A, but we can answer questions during the session as well. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Libby from Triple Point to give us an overview of the scheme. Over to you, Libby.
Thank you, Megan. Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. If we could flick to the next slide, please. Perfect. So to firstly introduce myself, I am Libby Carr and I am a relationship manager at Triple Point. So I will be your first point of contact when coming forwards with an application to the Green Heat Network Fund. Triple Point Heat Networks were appointed back in March 2022 as the delivery partner to DESNZ, and we are the exact same team that were the delivery partner for the Heat Networks investment project. To give you a quick overview of the wider team, so as I say, I work for Triple Point and we are an investment management firm and the project lead. So we work on the business development and investment management of the Green Heat Network Fund scheme. We then have GEMserve, who are responsible for all of our events, alongside the data and system management. They also provide the application support and most of the comms that we send out to the market. We then have Asteros, who lead on the financial and commercial assessment and are the experts with everything to do with the application form. ACOM are responsible for the technical analysis and head up the assessment team. We have support available from the team at Amberside, who deal with most of our investor relations and provide some great support to the RM team. And last, but by no means least, we have the clean tech law firm LuxNova, who deal with all things documentation and provide the legal and commercial support as well. Next slide, please. So for anyone new to the Green Heat Network Fund, GHNF is a grant funding scheme with funds available to support new low carbon heat networks, as well as the decarbonisation or expansion of existing networks. The scheme is open to all organisations responsible for the development of heat networks. So that includes public, private and third sector organisations such as the MOJ. Funding is available for commercialisation only, commercialisation and construction, or construction only projects in England. I would just like to mention, however, if you are to come forward with a commercialisation only request, you would need to demonstrate that you do have a fully funded construction project. And then just to confirm, the closing date for round 10 of the Green Heat Network Fund is the 7th of November. Next slide, please. Perfect. So one of the most exciting parts of the GHNF is its focus on market transformation. So we want projects that don't just deliver heat networks, but also drive wider growth across the sector. As part of your application, we're expecting projects to sign up and commit to various points, which will enable growth within the supply chain. These are the commitments we're expecting of projects to critically help address the skills gap within the heat network sector. So there have been some updates included within the Round 10 guidance for our expectations of our applicants, but overall they largely fit into these three categories. So for infrastructure commitments, we're looking for fair and open procurement. We want you to contribute to a reliable and resilient energy system through your project. It's worth noting that for our large projects, you are expected to include a description of the local economic strategy developed with the council. Around skills, we want to identify opportunities to address the skills gap and whether there are any particular elements of your project that would allow certain skills to be developed. We want fair and open recruitment, and we want to understand how many jobs you think you will be able to create. So these could be full-time equivalent, training, or apprenticeship opportunities. Alongside this, applicants are required to highlight areas of existing skills shortages and how your project can help address them while also supporting the delivery of national skills training. Around innovation, we want you to look at ways your project will enable investment in research and development. Applicants should complete the R&D table included within the application form with activities that will be undertaken by either the heat network developer or your suppliers. It's worth noting for medium and large projects, you must provide a minimum of one activity with an expected outcome, a KPI, and a timeline for review. But most importantly, and one of the crucial parts of all of these commitments, is the sharing of the learnings. DESNZ are expecting you to be reporting on this, and hopefully through the projects that we support through GHNF, lots of wider learnings can go out to the market, which will help with the build out of more heat networks going forwards. The market transformation commitment guidance is incorporated within the Round 10 main guidance document, so please do familiarise yourself with the requirements of your project ahead of submitting your application. Next slide, please. So to give an introduction to the National Wealth Fund, we've been working alongside the team at DESNZ with the NWF, who are a government-owned fund, and we've been trying to help simplify the process of providing funding to heat networks. It's a really exciting opportunity for all local authority applicants. The bank is able to provide preferential rates, and that is 40 basis points cheaper than PWLB. So there are some minimum ticket sizes. For local authorities, the minimum funding amount is £5 million. But the bank are also really interested in talking to private sector, but that is for the larger projects, as the minimum ticket size is 25 million. It is important to note that there is a new section within the application form on the checklist tab, and we are inviting applicants to disclose your hurdle rate, presuming NWF investment. Simon will be given a run through of the application form a bit later this morning, so he will touch in on some more detail in this later. All Round 10 applicants to the GHNF will need to confirm via email that they are happy to be contacted by NWF. Engagement must take place as soon as possible, so if you haven't done so already, please reach out to your designated relationship manager. It will allow NWF to review the projects to see which will be suitable for their subsidised funding. So hopefully, lots of our projects will be in conversation with the team at the bank soon. Next slide, please. So just before the team go into detail of the application process, I thought it might be helpful to share some hints and tips to assist with your application to the GHNF. So we recommend applicants focus on the strategic value of your schemes. We want to see ambitious projects with the potential for significant expansion opportunities. There's a renewed focus that projects supported through GHNF are supporting or at least not impeding future zoning within the area. With a limited budget, our investment committee want to support projects that have the ability to obtain the greatest benefits. Please remember that for a Round 10 application, you can only apply for funding in financial years 26-27 and 27-28. Alongside your application, you will need to evidence your programme supports this. We urge you to try and be as accurate as possible with your spend profile. If you are unable to spend your allocated amount of funding in the given financial year, not only is it lost to you as a project, but also to the GHNF scheme and the market as a whole. Please ensure you provide detail about your funding sources and ensure that you are only applying for the grant amount that you need. The assessment team and investment committee want to understand where your remaining funding will be coming from, so please be very clear on the type of funding source and the progress that you have made in securing that. Applicants are expected to provide concept designs to REBA Stage 2 for the Energy Centre and REBA 2 equivalent designs for the pipework routing. Please, just as a note, applicants will be marked down and may fail the assessment if sufficient design development has not been demonstrated. And finally, I just wanted to highlight that there has been some updates to the guidance for round 10. I've mentioned a couple already, and the team are going to be going into more detail later this morning, but please carefully review these ahead of submitting your application. If you have any questions or queries around how the updates may affect the eligibility of your project, please reach out to your relationship manager and we'll be happy to help. Next slide, please. So finally, and just my last ask would be to please engage with the relationship management team as soon as possible. We can help provide you with access to the wider team and go through any specific issues you may have. Our enquiries email is on the screen now, so please get in touch as soon as possible, and hopefully we can make the application process as smooth as possible for you.
Great, thank you so much, Libby. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A, but we will now move on to our next session. So I'll hand over to Peter, who's going to discuss eligibility, the application and assessment process. So over to you.
Morning, I'm Peter Concannon from AECOM. So we are the technical partner of the delivery team, and we also are the lead assessors for applications into the Green Heat Network Fund. If we could go to the next slide, please. So as Libby has already said, there are some changes to the way that the schemes will be looked at and applications will be looked at, and there is now more of a focus on strategic issues that we will be taking into account when reviewing projects. As Libby said, what we want to see is enhancement of zoning opportunities rather than schemes that will prevent or delay the development of the wider zone. So a couple of quotes that are directly out of the revised guidance for round 10. The second one particularly, which is making investment decisions, the strategic importance of potential expansion of heat network projects will be taken into account, and clearly those that can demonstrate this will be viewed more favourably. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate that the key things that we'll be looking at, clearly schemes have got to meet eligibility criteria. There is renewed and increased emphasis on demonstrating the deliverability of your scheme, and there's also now this evidence of credible expansion that is going to be included in the assessment. Evidence about expansion couldn't be included into your techno-economic feasibility, So if you need to oversize pipe work or leave additional space in energy centres for expansion of heat sources, then that might be covered in your techno-economic feasibility. But equally, the expansion note in reference 2.2 is now becoming more important, and we want to see in that some credible evidence of how your scheme can expand. For AZP and zonal scale projects, we want to emphasize that we still need to be able to have a deliverable scheme, and therefore we are suggesting that you should be presenting to us the reference scheme with the zonal expansion being in your expansion note. So that there is the capability to grow into the zone, but you're presenting for funding with the GHNF a deliverable scheme. We also need to see evidence of stakeholder engagement. It isn't sufficient just to say that you will rely on zonal powers coming up to ensure that everybody connects, because at the current time there are no zonal powers in place, and therefore we want to see a scheme that can deliver today, not necessarily rely on future legislation to deliver. So we're still expecting to see evidence of stakeholder engagement for your reference scheme. The sort of scale that we are looking at, if you are in a zonal opportunity area, or if there is known zonal maps, we expect some reference to that. We expect the scale of expansion, future expansion, to be in line with what is in those documents, or to show credible reasons why that isn't a sensible solution. So please be aware that the existing work on heat zoning that is now in public domain needs to be considered when you're looking at your scheme. Next slide, please. So one of the other changes that's come in for this round is the definition of heat networks has been revised, and we have in that revision brought out campus networks as a separate set of networks that may come forward for GHNF. The reason for identifying these networks is because there is a risk that a campus network may take away a large chunk of heat demand in an area that is effectively a zonal area, and it may make that zone less attractive and therefore reduce the potential to develop that zone. What we don't want to do is be funding schemes that will make the delivery of zonal scale networks less likely going forward. So where an operator or an owner has a set of buildings that they are looking to decarbonize but cannot expand outside their own estate, either because that doesn't fit in with their remit, or because that's not something that they want to do, then we will be looking at that as a campus network. Universities and hospitals are clearly easily identifiable potential zone campus networks, but equally it could be either the refurbishment of an existing housing estate, or development of a new build housing estate or something of that nature, somewhere where it is very insular and will isolate that group of buildings away from the wider opportunities. We will not, or campus networks will not be eligible for funding under round 10, and strongly recommend that if you think you may fall under that definition, that you contact the relationship managers to discuss your network and how that might fit into a wider zonal area. Next slide, please. One of the other things that we'll also be looking at are those people who have multiple applications or have already been granted multiple awards, to see that they are delivering on their existing commitments, to ensure that we are not overloading those organisations by giving them more grant that they don't have the resources to deliver. So it may be that if you have already got one or more awards, that we will be asking questions of you about delivery of your existing awards, to ensure that if you are awarded further funding, you have the capacity and ability to disperse that funding within the timescales that apply to your grant. Next slide, please. So those were mainly the new things that are coming forward. We'll go through now the standard eligibility criteria. So we will fund access to heat sources, such as river source heat pump. We would put in we would be happy to support the infrastructure that's necessary to access the river. If it's an energy from waste plant, we would be happy to support the infrastructure that accesses the heat. What we will not do is support the development of, say, an energy from waste plant itself, but we will support infrastructure to access the heat from it. We would support energy centres and low carbon heat generation plant that needs to go in there, together with backup and supporting plant. We will support the primary distribution network around from building to building, and in some cases, or in a number of cases, we will support the secondary distribution within multi-residential buildings, or multi-tenant buildings. What we aren't going to support with secondary networks is the replacement of end-of-life existing systems. That is not part of the GHNF remit, but we would say fund the installation of individual HIUs if they weren't in place at the current time. We definitely will not fund tertiary distribution and tertiary systems. So in a multi-tenanted or residential building, we wouldn't support the replacement or installation of equipment within the dwelling beyond the HIU. Next slide, please. So GHNF has introduced the concept of sleeving of heat. So this is designed for where you have a large existing network that can't decarbonize in one step. But what we would support is the idea of introducing new low or zero carbon heat generation capacity and new heat loads to consume that low carbon heat. And by new heat loads, it could be new build, but it could equally be an existing building that is just new to the network. So the new low carbon heat that is generated is then sleeved across the existing network and feeds the new connections. And we need to see a minimum demand of 2 gigawatt hours per year of new connection. Next slide, please. Ambient loops and shared ground loops are becoming more prevalent in the network developments, and these are eligible, but there are some specific things that need to be taken into account with these sort of networks. So typically, these networks will have heat pumps within individual customer buildings, or even within multi-residential buildings within individual customers' demise. And it's therefore important that we include the electrical costs and electrical carbon emissions that occur that are related to those customer heat pumps, because they are part of the delivery of the system. So the costs may or may not come from the capital cost may or may not be part of the costs of the heat network, but the electricity that is used within the dwelling or within the building is part of the customer's cost of heat and needs to be taken into account. And the carbon saving or carbon use generated by the electricity use within the dwelling or customer's demise needs to be included in the carbon balance. So there are some tweaks that need to be, or approaches that need to be used when filling out the application form, and we would recommend that you contact the relationship managers to get advice on how to do that correctly. Otherwise, we would be having to come back in the assessment period to get you to correct your application form. Next slide, please. Additionality is one of the requirements of the scheme. We need to be able to show that we are providing something additional for the grant funding that's being received. We're not just supporting business as usual. So there are a couple of particular instances that have been highlighted over the previous rounds that are required to provide additional evidence of additionality. So where we have a predominantly new build residential scheme or new build scheme, the up and coming building regulation changes are likely to mandate electrical solutions to providing heating and cooling. And therefore it's important that we show that supporting a heat network will offer benefits over and above what would be mandated by regulation anyway. So we want to see that carbon savings will be achieved compared to the counterfactual. This is automatically generated within the GHNF application form. So you don't actually have to do the calculation, but you can actually have a look and see whether you are meeting that criteria. We also want to see what other benefits that a heat network would bring compared to a building by building solution. And we have the reference 10.1 where you can put that evidence, which may be to do with the level of carbon savings or reduction in electrical infrastructure that needs to be installed, or that your network will open up a bigger opportunity that otherwise might not be sensible to install a heat network for. If, however, you are using recovered heat, then that is sufficient evidence of additionality for that case. A second group of buildings that we need to see additional benefits for is where you have existing electrical heating and you're proposing to replace that with a wet system. The question is, well, if the grid is going to decarbonize, what are you offering that is additional? So it is unlikely that where the majority of existing existing buildings are electrically heated, it is unlikely that this will be viewed as a good candidate for funding. But if you can show that you have you are offering major additional benefits, then we will at least look at that opportunity. Next slide, please. So one of the things that will be looked at in detail regarding deliverability is stakeholder engagement. And heat loads, we need to really see that customers are fully aware of the scheme and that they have engaged with the applicants to acknowledge that the scheme and its benefits, and we ideally want to see them supporting connection to the scheme so that we have a level of confidence that the potential heat customers that are being put forward as connections in your application are actually going to be delivered to ensure the network is viable and ensure that the benefits that you are suggesting you can deliver with your network will be delivered. There's also a need for public sector customers to make sure that that you as applicants can demonstrate that you understand any existing long-term arrangements that might impact on connection, that there are that the need for funding any changes that might be needed within the customer building or buildings are understood, and that there is at least some idea of where the funding for those changes is going to come from. And the final one is for public procurement. Have the public procurement rules been taken into account? Do you understand what limitations might be applied? How would you ensure connection if public procurement has to be used to allow the public sector customer to actually connect? Next slide, please. So that's the customers, but there's equally heat sources where we have bulk heat supply. Really, we want to see again strong engagement with the supplier. Have tariffs been discussed? Do we know what level of tariff is likely? Are the major heads of terms known? Are they agreed? And we want to see strong support from the heat supplier for engaging and connecting with the network. Other regulatory bodies might also be involved, particularly the Environment Agency, where we have water source heat pumps, or river authorities. So are these regulatory bodies aware of the scheme? What stages are your discussions at? What limitations might apply? How secure are those heat sources and access to heat? We want to see it. We want to see evidence that you will be able to use the heat source that you're proposing in your application. There's also around highways, useful to ensure that you understand whether lane rental charges may apply, and if so, how you've taken these into account in your financial assessment of your scheme. Next slide, please. So eligible costs, the Green Heat Network Fund generally uses a list of what's not eligible to identify what we won't fund, and this is set out in the guidance, but we won't be funding any sunk costs. So if you've already put money into a particular activity or piece of equipment, we won't fund that. As I said before, we won't fund heating and cooling sources that have other functions. So we won't fund an energy from waste plant, but we will fund the connection to it. We're not going to fund the tertiary heat distribution systems. We're not here to fund changes to existing building fabric, or indeed efficiency changes to the existing heat networks. There are other schemes for that. We won't fund first of a kind technology. We don't pay VAT. We won't pay exclusively agricultural heat networks. And there are a number of restrictions around biogas and biomass fueled systems that need to be considered if you are looking at those types of low carbon plant. And where you have non-heating or cooling costs that you believe are should be included, then you have to show that those will either reduce or at least won't make will either improve or won't make a reduction to the net present value of your scheme. So in other words, we don't want the heat network to be funding the non-heating and cooling equipment. We want the opposite to occur, so that adding in the non-heating and cooling equipment improves the financial performance of the heat network. Next slide, please. So when you put your application together, there is a main Excel or an Excel main application form, which Simon Carmen will take you through in more detail. We're then asking for supporting evidence, and we provide a file structure for you to locate that evidence in. We've made some changes. So for those who have applied before, we've made some changes to the structure to try and make it more simpler to for applicants to locate the correct place to put their evidence, make it easier for us to identify what relates to certain questions. So those that are highlighted in this slide have moved significantly. We've tried to make it easier. So customer connections are identified separately from access to thermal energy, the planning and land rights for energy centres and networks separated out from other items. There's then some optional evidence that can be provided. So the expansion of heat networks is included in that optional evidence, but it probably needs to be considered a bit more as being mandatory rather than optional, really. And going forward, I suspect that will move into the mandatory section of evidence. And then there's a set of contingent evidence, which depends on what your scheme has in it as to whether it's relevant or not. So the changes to the mandatory evidence, though, is structure is provided in the guidance. Please have a look at that and see what we are asking for in each of those different sections. Next slide, please. So this is a competitive application, and the applicants will all be scored on different criteria. The capped award, so the pence per kilowatt hour, is the starting point for the scoring, and that is the main score. But there are a series of adjustment metrics that are then applied, and these will include deliverability, so how deliverable, carbon abatement, volume of thermal energy, expansion potential, innovation, and energy efficiency. And as I say, the expansion potential and deliverability are again the key things in those 5 adjustment metrics. So that relates then to those 3 things that are necessary to meet the eligibility criteria, have a deliverable scheme, and demonstrate expansion potential. The necessary eligibility metrics are set out in the guidance and provided here. So we have a carbon gate minimum or maximum carbon emissions per kilowatt hour of thermal energy delivered. Your scheme mustn't cause customer detriment for domestic customers or micro businesses. You need to demonstrate a social IRR of 3.5% or greater over the 40-year period. You need a minimum demand of 100 gigawatt hours, or if you are classed as a rural off-gas grid network, then the equivalent of 100 dwellings or more. Your grant ask must be less than 50% of eligible costs, which is commercialisation and construction. and there is a cap on the pence per kilowatt hour that you can ask for of 4.5 pence. And as I've said, non-heating and cooling costs can only be included if they enhance or don't cause detriment to the financial position of your scheme. Next slide, please. There are a number of other requirements that just need to be brought to people's attention. We've already discussed the REBA 2 or equivalent. So that will be looked at. We need to see that the scheme you're putting forward is sufficiently developed to have a level of confidence in the costs and that the deliverability of the scheme. There's also a need now to put in unique property references, please, for the public sector buildings, and applicants need to sign up to the National Underground Asset Register, so that we can include your assets into that database. Next slide, please. So round 10 closes on midnight, 7th of November. There is in round 11 and round 12 are mentioned in the guidance. Approximately, we don't have exact dates for those, but we're anticipating round 11 March 2026. And we're anticipating round 12 in August 2026. If you register your interests, you will be provided with access to an area on SharePoint that you can then upload your application to. You'll be provided with an application pack, and a relationship manager can be appointed to your scheme to support you through the application process. Next slide, please. The actual timeline for the assessment. So when the application window closes, there will be a period where we will do an initial review of your information. We will then ask any clarifications, and you'll have 5 working days to respond to that. We will re-review that information, and if there are any further clarifications, then we'll ask those, and there's another 3-day period, working day period, to respond to those. There is then a period where we will develop the draft reports. Those will be reviewed by the investment committee. They may choose to ask further clarification questions, in which case we will send those out to applicants, and they'll have another working week to respond, and then we will develop the final reports with an investment committee at the end of that period. Because of the clarifications, we strongly recommend that you have the resources in place to answer these. It is very frustrating when we ask a clarification and it's quite clear from the answer that the necessary people aren't available to answer those, and that somebody is trying to do their best but doesn't really know the full answer. So please be aware of that timetable, and please try and have the resources necessary available should they be needed. Next slide, please. Okay, I can either answer questions now, or please do put any questions in the chat. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next section.
Very much. I can just see if there's any questions that have come through in the chat. We might have time to answer a few of these now. There's one about the public sector decarbonisation scheme. Based on GHNF's not eligible costs, can we combine public sector decarbonisation scheme with GHNF? Is there a model for us to split carbon funding into funding schemes across these, if you're able to answer that one?
Okay, so the public sector, if you have already got funding for public sector decarbonisation scheme, it will depend what your funding is for. If you have identified that you want to connect to a heat network, but that the PSDS funding is to cover works on your site that enable that connection, that's fine. What we don't want to be doing is doubling up on both PSDS and GHNF funding the same things. So it wouldn't be acceptable for both schemes to fund the extension of a pipe from a pumping station, say, to your property, if that were the case, if they were in both applications. But it is possible, if you can identify what is in PSDS that is additional to GHNF, then that wouldn't preclude you from applying and being granted a GHNF grant. So we have some hands up, but I don't think I have control of who can speak.
My name's Jason Newman. I'll put my hand up.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Peter, for the presentation. It'd be great if we can get a copy of the slides, obviously, but the question I had is around staffing. We're a local authority, so obviously staffing is always going to be a stress point, resource issue. So I appreciate that you won't be funding existing project staff, but would you be considering funding for project delivery staff, for example, on behalf of the local authority, if it was, you know, overseeing the project or part overseeing the project in combination with a private investor? So that's my question.
Okay, so this becomes one of those case-by-case answers, but to give you some clear examples, if you had to employ somebody particularly to do that overseeing role,
yeah,
that would be for consideration of, you know, we consider that.
Okay.
If you are saying you have somebody who's employed today and 90% of their job is doing something within the local authority and 10% of their job will be to look at the heat network, we wouldn't fund that. Obviously, between those two, there's varying degrees of level of engagement, and I think I would recommend you bring particular cases to the RM's attention for them to get further guidance on what it applies in your particular instance.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Peter.
Another hand up.
Hi, Peter. It's Ving here. I'm from
Yeah.
Wolverhampton. So basically, I'm asking the question about the public sector decarbonization scheme because we are under the devolved government. So we put in the stage 1 development funding. So, that means that the deadline for delivery is the stage 2, which will be July next year. So where we're coming from is we want to apply for stage 1 and we put in an air source heat pump for the site, but the heat demand on the side it is our big laser center. It literally already on its own. It already over 2 gigawatt consumption. So it already meet the demand, and we try to combine our two another building nearby. So we put in the PSDS for that side as as the air source heat pump to minimize our cost and our match funding. But when we do the stage, rebus stage 2 on the ground source heat pump, so we pursue 2 options, and then if that another option pay off itself when we can combine with the Green Heat Network Fund, then we pursue the second option and we're trying to combine the public sector funding. So I talked to our devolved government and they say there is the potential, but you need to be very clear on the carbon split.
Yeah.
So basically the borehole and everything else we try, and the infrastructure for the pipe work, everything we've tried to claim it on the Green Heat Network Fund, and then and maybe the pumps, the energy efficiency, the LED lighting and all this other element inside the building we claim on the PSDS as the enabling work and BMS and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, yes, you're right. You've got to very much make sure you delineate what you're funding under PSDS and what you're funding under GHNF.
Yeah.
And make it very clear. And if you put in so if you're saying, well, we may be able to fund the heat pump from PSDS, but the pipe work that connects multiple buildings together would be funded under GHNF, then that would be an interesting one. I've not seen that, but I think that would be something that we would certainly consider.
Thank you. If you don't mind, maybe I reach out on the technical assessment to say that if it's feasible, so we can pursue with the rebus stage 2.
Yeah, I think if you speak to the relationship managers, and then they can take that forward and ask the wider team.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. I have a Rowan.
Hi there. Yeah, Ronan Layden here. Couple of questions just on customer detriment. So I noticed that the domestic customer detriment is against a gas counterfactual. So I just wanted you to be able to just elaborate slightly on that. For example, in our case, it would be private multi-residential buildings that we'd be connecting. So I just wanted to check that we are still against a gas counterfactual. And the second question was, how does the customer detriment work for commercial buildings in terms of cooling as well as heating? Because obviously you'll have different calculations for the cost of heat compared to the cost of cooling.
So customer detriment. So if you have an existing building, its counterfactual will be gas within the application form. And if you have a new building, new connection, then that will be assessed against a heat pump counterfactual.
Sorry, it is existing building, but can I just check you're saying in residential terms?
It will be gas, will be the counterfactual. What we have done, and Simon may say more, but what we have done for round 10 is we've updated the metrics that go into that calculation to take account of the change of markets that has been that's happened over the last few years. So the counterfactual is effectively updated now to a current counterfactual. Again, if there are problems you should be able to see whether it passes that customer detriment. It's one of the things about the application form is that it will tell you whether you pass these metrics. But if you are struggling, then come back to your relationship manager, and we can have a look at that.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone. I think we'll move on to the next part of the seminar. If you've got any further questions for Peter, please put them in the chat and we can respond to those in written format. So yes, next portion we'll be looking at the application form. So I will hand over to Simon for this.
Okay, good morning. I'm Simon Carman, Astros Advisors. I'll be focusing on the Excel-based application form, which we're responsible for, and give you some hints and talk you through a few of the changes that have happened since the last round 9. So this is substantially the same as previous rounds of Green Heat Network Fund, but there have been some additions to the application form and a few little tweaks to it as well between round 9 and round 10. So please, for your round 10 application, use the round 10 application form if you've applied before and have old versions of the application form. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, within the application form, on one of the tabs, there's a map of the application form itself. You can go in there and read what each of the sheets, what the purpose of each of the sheets are. I won't do that now. So you have yellow tabbed sheets are input sheets for your information and your data. The grey tabbed sheets are calculation sheets, and the purple tabbed sheet is the key output sheet. So all of those sheets are visible, and the application form itself generates metrics that are the key assessment metrics, and those metrics are all visible to you, so you can see whether you pass the key tests or not before you've submitted your application form. And it generates some metrics that are useful for us in comparative purposes. The application form is obviously a standard application form for all GHNF applications, and it's a relatively small data set actually that we're asking for from applicants, and occasionally we get schemes that are a little bit more difficult to fit into the constraints of the application form as it's written, but we've never failed to represent a scheme accurately through the application form. That's kind of a challenge, I guess. And if you are having trouble seeing where to put the information or how to represent your scheme accurately, please get in contact with us. You can have a chat with us, and we've seen most things in the past. Okay, next one, please. Okay, a couple of key points. These are mainly to try to avoid us going back immediately with a whole bunch of clarification questions that you could have avoided, and that kind of takes up valuable clarification time, which is actually valuable for you. We'd rather use the clarification process to really clarify points rather than just correct easy mistakes. So what we ask is that the main application form, that's one of the tabs in the application form, the main application form sheet, that's provided separately in an unlocked version of the application form. There's just a couple of sheets in that unlocked version. Could you copy that application form from there into your financial model or your TEM, and then link the cells in that application form to your TEM or financial model? I'm sure you'll find that the easiest way to populate the application form, that bit of the application form. But the other thing it does with us is it enables us to be able to trace through where the numbers come from and how they were calculated within your models. So it makes our understanding of what you've done a lot easier. We need at least 40 years of operational cash flows from first heat on or cooling on. That's in order to calculate some of the metrics that are calculated over long periods of time. If we have less than 40 years, we'll have to come back to you to agree how we deal with that situation. Sometimes you might be operating under a concession that's say 25 years, and then we need to have a discussion about what the best way to deal with that is. But most projects can provide 40 years worth of data. There's a column F in the main application tab. Says what units we're looking for in terms of your inputs. Please be mindful of those units. Some of them are really critical, and we get really strange numbers. So for instance, all of the pound signs within the application form should be in pound thousands, not pound million or pounds. And all of the kind of volumetric data should be in kilowatts or kilowatt hours rather than megawatt hours. So please pay attention to that. We need numbers in real terms, so not inflated. So they can follow a real price curve, but we're not looking for inflation in the model, and that's a comparative thing so that we can compare apples with apples. There are quite a lot of error checking going on within the application form itself. They typically red if there's an error, and they go green when they're not. And all the errors on an individual sheet, once they're cleared, the sheet will go green, and once all of the sheets have cleared all of their error messages, the whole application workbook will show as green. And in order for those error messages to go completely, the checklist at the back needs to be completed, and actually completing some of the checklist items will help to clear some of the calculation errors as well in the model, because some of the checklist is telling it whether it's different types of networks and which counterfactuals to use and stuff. So have a quick look through the checklist to try and complete as much of the checklist as you can at the start. Make that your first job, and then there'll be a whole load of stuff that you'll only want to check off once you've actually finished it at the end. But do the ones you can do first early on. There's a part in the application form where we ask you which information we can publish. DESNZ publishes the pipeline and gets information from the application forms to publish a pipeline of projects, and the more information we can publish, the better for the market, we believe, but some of that might be commercial. So we ask you to indicate which information you're happy for us to publish. This is a new thing that's come in for round 10. So National Wealth Fund has a new product that they're developing, which they're calling a patient equity product, which is available to private sector investors to co-invest alongside private sector investors. If you're talking to the National Wealth Fund about that, and you've made some progress towards that, we ask you in a section to provide your hurdle rate with and without the National Wealth Fund. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. You need to pass all the gated metrics, and customer detriment is one of those gated metrics, and you need to make sure that the post-grant internal rate of return that your project is indicating in the application form isn't excessive. There's a number above which the Green Heat Network Fund is not happy to fund. That number's not published, but you need to tell us what your IRR is. We have a pretty good idea now what IRRs, what the range of IRRs are across the market, and excessive IRRs, but we're not providing extra grant to fund excessive IRRs. And actually, because it's competitive, one of the key metrics Peter mentioned the strategic view that's been becoming more important in this, but one of the key actual metrics that ranks applications one against another is the level of grant that you're asking for compared to the amount of heat that your project is generating. So as a general rule, the government gets more bang for its buck if it's putting less grant into bigger schemes. So it's preferring those applications that have lower numbers in relation to that metric. So the other thing is there's a very comprehensive main application guidance which is available for everybody to look at. There's an additional piece of guidance which is around specifically the application form, and you needn't read it from beginning to end, but I would recommend it as a guide if you're scratching your head over where to put a number or what a particular line item might be asking for. It describes what you should put where in the application form, so it's probably a good first port of call. Okay, next please. Okay, cost benefit. Peter mentioned this. I don't think I'll dwell on this slide actually because Peter's covered this. What I'll do is I'll actually show it to you on the application form. So I think maybe the next slide is going into the application form. Just make sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share the application form now. Okay. Is that visible, Megan?
Yes, all good, thanks.
Okay. Okay, here's the cover sheet. This tab, which is the grey tab called Map, is the one where it explains what each of the tabs, what the purpose of the tabs are for. And here is the main output tab that you'll probably be paying some attention. So we have some gated metrics which have passes and fails, and the application form generates those gated metrics from the data. In terms of which, so there's a cap of £1 million, for instance, for commercialisation. If you ask for more than £1 million, it'll say you've failed it. If you ask for more than 50% of the eligible capex, you'll get a fail. The capped award in terms of the pence per kilowatt hour, which is the amount of grant that you ask for, the total of commercialisation and construction grant divided by the heat that your scheme generates, it's capped at 4.5 pence. But competitive applications are now probably hovering around the 2 pence per kilowatt hour. So that number's come down over time as the heat network sector has developed. So they're the gated metrics. There are some other metrics here that are presented. Right, customer detriment in relation to what you have to pass. Your existing residential or existing micro business customers have to be below the levelized tariff that your scheme generates has to be lower than the levelized cost of a counterfactual that is calculated within this spreadsheet, and that counterfactual for existing residential is gas, as Peter has already mentioned. It also needs to pass for residential and micro businesses. It needs to be lower than a air source heat pump or electric counterfactual. So the numbers are presented here, and I'll show you where they come from in a little bit. And then down here we just kept calculating some benchmark numbers and some metrics that we use for our application process. In terms of the input sheets, then a very simple input sheet which is asking for your applicant details. It's totally self-explanatory, who your people are, what their contact details are, and who'll be executing the documents at the end of the process, etc. So that's really self-explanatory. This next sheet, which is financial viability, is a sheet that's you're probably familiar with in terms of qualification for bids and stuff, and this is a very simplified version of it. And depending on what answers you give, so do you have an immediate parent company? True, yes. It ungrays certain boxes for you to fill in the information. If you answer false, it doesn't require you to answer that information. So you can work your way down that sheet, and again, there's some declarations that you have to make, and some confirmations that you have to make, and some information that you have to provide. Now, the main sheet, the main application sheet, this is where the key financial information is, and information about like volumes of heat that are supplied and volumes of heat that are generated. So as has already been mentioned by Libby, you can only apply for 26, 27 and 27, 28 in terms of the grant amounts. That's for this application round. In future application rounds, we're anticipating that budget will have been formally made available by the scheme for later years. This section essentially is the section that calculates the internal rate of return of your scheme. So you put your income, these are cash flows, income in real terms when they occur, your connection income, your fixed charge, variable charge, and other subsidies that you've got. You put your income in here, your expenditure in here, and your capex in here. So it's a cash flow analysis, and then it calculates an IRR on the basis of that information, and it calculates an IRR including the grant and excluding the grant. And the way you size your grant is to tell us what your required internal rate of return is. You also need to evidence why it is that, and explain why it is that rate of return for your project, and then it calculates a rate of return without grant, and the grant should be sized such that it gets you from a suboptimal rate of return up to your required hurdle rate. So that's how you size your grant, and then that kicks out whatever it kicks out in terms of a pence per kilowatt hour for the heat that's generated. So that's the IRR calculation. Now, just really quickly, there are 3 lines in here that are to do with this non-heating and cooling related expenditure. So we have an income line here. So the best way to think of it, an example of this might be a PV plant that is being built alongside the energy centre that is supplying electricity to a heat pump, say. Now that energy centre, the PV, is not eligible for Green Heat Network funding grants, so you would normally not include it in here. The only reason you include it is if it is IRR enhancing, so if it actually improves the net present value or the IRR of your scheme, then you'd include it in here. So you'd say what the savings are from that, or the income that it generates, the non-heat, a summary of the expenditure to do with those non-heat related items, and then the capex, non-heat related. So those 3 lines. Most applications don't include anything for this, and then to complete the circuit, I guess, you fill in this sheet. So this sheet then provides more information around those items. It reconciles the totals back to to that sheet that you've just seen. It gives a description of what it is, and it calculates whether it's a positive net present value or a negative net present value. And if it's positive, it says yes, okay, you can continue including it. It's only very rarely that we see that filled in, but if you are in that position, give us a call and we'll talk you through it. Okay, the customer detriment is probably worth talking about. So if in here you're putting your tariffs that you're charging these customer types, so we're particularly interested in the existing domestic and micro business and the new build, because they're the ones that you have to pass. What you're actually charging them, the total income from those customer groups, is what comes in here. Now, interestingly, this might be different. The income that you show here might be different, or the numbers you show here might be different to the income that you show up here as part of your IRR calculation. So, for instance, if you're supplying bulk heat to a development, and then the development is then distributing it onto customers, then you might your bulk heat is the income that your project is receiving, but the numbers that we're interested in from the customer perspective is what they're ultimately paying in total. So they might be paying, and this happens with ambient loop. So if you're supplying heat as part of the network that's metered to an ambient loop, and then the residents are then paying electricity for their in-building heat pumps, you need to include the cost of the energy that the residents are spending on their in-building heat pumps, even though it isn't income to your heat network, and you'd include it in this section, because ultimately government wants to satisfy itself that it is not giving grants to projects where these particular customer groups are paying more than they would otherwise have to pay. And again, and sometimes connection charges there can be a discussion around connection charges. If, for instance, the connection charge is a new development, the connection charge is paid by the developer, isn't passed on to the resident, isn't paid by the residents, it's just included within the cost of the properties that are sold or rented out, then you don't include the connection charge in here, but you would include the connection charge in the top. Okay, there's only a couple of other things I want to point on and make on this sheet. Down here, this is new, this section, funding sources for this application round. So here, we want to see that the scheme is, the applicant understands where the funding is coming from, that all of the funding coming from to pay for the initial capital. So here we're asking for, there's a drop down list to ask for the types of funding and what and how much funding, how much of the initial investment is being provided for that. So how much funding is being provided by that funding type. And this total down here should be what your initial capital investment requirements are. And then finally, the final section that we've added in addition in this application round is a little bit of information around the energy supply. So we're asking, where is the energy coming from? Is it either an applicant built energy centre, or are you purchasing it from a third party? What is it? Just describe it. How much of your heat supply is provided by it? And then this column, which brings it in line with the customer confidence around the level of commitment from customers. We ask for in relation to particularly third party purchasers of heat, where are you at in terms of securing that supply? If it's your own supply, then you just tick not applicable here. Okay, the customer tariff note is fairly self-explanatory. We ask you for the different customer types, who you're supplying, what type, who they are, existing or new build, number of connections, etc. Similar to the supplier drop-down menu, this is the customer confidence drop-down menu. It's a very similar list from a customer supply perspective. Here's your unique property reference number that Peter was talking about. Peak heat demand is important. That this is how the counterfactual is sized and costed. So it's the counterfactual is based on peak heat for customers, your tariff structure, and then your demand profile by year here. And there's similar for cooling. And these numbers, there are totals on the main application form, and this is a breakdown of those totals, and this just checks that the totals equals the totals that are shown on this sheet. Market transformation. This is a substantially new sheet, or not new sheet. There are some new questions in here. Just note it picks up whether you're a small, medium, or large scheme based on the capital value of the scheme, which it picks up from elsewhere, and it asks you to fill in different information, whether you're different what size scheme you are. This is the sheet where we asked about the publication, and these are the areas where, if you're happy to include the capex values, say yes. If you're happy to include the IRR values, say yes. If you're happy, etc. And if you're not, then say no. This is the information that DESNZ would like to publish on its pipeline list. Cost benefit we've done, and checklist finally. This checklist, just yes or no. As I said, whiz through this at the start to see if you can fill in any of the information to start with. It'll help with some of the other calculations in the application form. Engagement with the National Wealth Fund. This is new. So have you engaged with the National Wealth Fund? Yes, no. If you have, the assumption is that the National Wealth Fund is a product that de-risks connection risks. And if your assessment is that it de-risks your connection risk, and that is why you're going for it, then we would expect you to have a lower hurdle rate IRR. So you need to tell us what your hurdle rates are with and without National Wealth Fund. And if you say you have been in contact with it, it allows you to populate those boxes. And that's it. I'm really running out of time. So I shall stop sharing. I haven't given any time for questions, sorry.
No worries, thanks, Simon. What we'll do, if anyone does have any further questions, the best way to get in contact is to email the inquiries inbox that we mentioned at the start of this seminar. Other ways to engage with us is to sign up to our mailing list. So you can do this also by emailing the inbox, or there's a contact form on our website as well where you can fill that in. We also send out regular updates as well through our social media channels, so please also feel free to follow us on there as well. Finally, just to sum up the support that's available to you, the application guidance is a really substantial document that covers the scheme eligibility, scoring criteria, funding requirements, evidence, the supporting documents that's required, and the application process. So please take the time to read this. As mentioned, it's a pretty hefty document, but very worthwhile as you're going through your application. We mentioned the application form, and that's been updated for this round. So please contact us if you have an old application form to receive the one for round 10 as well. We also send this out via an application pack. So there's a detailed application form guidance mentioned earlier found within this. So again, please email us to receive this. As we're out of time, I think we'll leave it there. So yeah, if you do have any further questions, please email in and we'll endeavour to get back to you. But yes, thank you very much everyone for joining today and best of luck with your applications. Thank you.